Bangladesh is voting and India is watching keenly. This is a critical election for Bangladesh. Not just will the outcome impact the fate of Bangladesh, but who forms the next government in Bangladesh will have direct security consequences for India and will have a clear and distinct impact on regional power dynamics in South Asia. There have been rising tensions between India and Bangladesh over a range of issues. Sheikh Hasina, former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, continues to be in India. This is where she sought refuge when violence erupted in 2024, and she continues to be here. Minority communities continue to be vulnerable in Bangladesh, and India has repeatedly raised the attack on the Hindu community in particular. India has perhaps rarely watched an election in Bangladesh with this much concern. A House panel led by Shashi Tharoor a few months ago recently flagged the situation in Bangladesh as the greatest strategic challenge since 1971. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, will this man on your screen be the next Prime Minister of Bangladesh? And will the return of the BNP still mean a manageable situation for India-Bangladesh relations? Remember, the Awami League has not been allowed to take part in these elections, and Sheikh Hasina, the ousted former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, sought refuge to India. More precisely, the Bangladesh army, in fact, facilitated that escape from Bangladesh to here in India. There has been some debate over whether India will have to take a decision on Hasina once there is a new government in place in Bangladesh. But what is being watched most keenly is how the Jamaat-e-Islami will perform. The Jamaat and the BNP were once on the same side. Today, the Jamaat-e-Islami leads a coalition against the BNP, including some Gen Z leaders who are seen to be much more stridently anti-India than other political entities. India will be watching with interest and some concern over how the Jamaat performs in Bangladesh. Remember, what happens in Bangladesh next will, of course, have geopolitical implications. But we have two eastern states heading for an election, Assam and West Bengal. India shares a 4,100-kilometer border with Bangladesh, and issues of infiltration as well as illegal immigration have become hot potato political subjects as well. So there is going to be a direct consequence for the regional dynamics in South Asia, but also for how domestic politics may play out in the election campaigns of Assam and West Bengal. To talk about the implications of what happens in Bangladesh for India, and also to talk about how these elections might change the course of history in Bangladesh, let me introduce our panel of experts today. I want to welcome to the program Asif is with us. Asif bin Ali is a doctoral fellow at the Georgia State University. He's from Bangladesh, and we welcome his perspective on the program today. Military veteran, former General Officer Commanding of the 15 Corps, General Dua is with us. Welcome to the program. Meenakshi Ganguly is with us. Meenakshi is with Human Rights Watch with a particular focus on the countries in South Asia. Meenakshi, it's good to have you with us. And also a veteran diplomat, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, is with us as well. Thank you very much, all of you. Ambassador Puri, let me in fact start straight away, with your first impressions of why this election matters, why it's being observed so keenly in India. Shashi Tharoor leads a parliamentary panel on foreign affairs. A few months ago, he said the situation in Bangladesh was India's greatest strategic challenge since 1971. There have been some anxieties about a renewal of ties, in particular between Bangladesh and Pakistan. There has been anxiety about China's footprint in Bangladesh. China has invested a lot in infrastructure in Bangladesh. I want to get the Indian perspective from you, and then we'll get our Bangladeshi colleague to give us the Bangladeshi perspective. Why does this election matter to India, Ambassador?
Barkha, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Look, let's be very clear. Bangladesh is a country which is not just in our neighborhood. We are on almost all sides of Bangladesh, other than the part of Bangladesh which abuts the Bay of Bengal. We have civilizational ties with them, and it's not a small country. Let's understand that too. And there's a history behind all of this. Bangladesh is certainly a country of great strategic interest to India. What happens in that country is important for us. And therefore, I think one just has to look at the map and to understand this. And there are a lot of implications. I won't go into the entire business of Bangladesh being a conduit for, let's say, the Pakistanis, the Chinese, or even the Americans for that. Let's leave that out. Bangladesh by itself, its stability, let me also say it's doing well, and a fact of tranquility in that country by itself is particularly important for India. Remember, Bangladesh, in some senses, is not just important because of Bangladesh, our civilizational links, the entire business of the Hindu community there, the entire question of Islamization. Also, it's in that sense not that far away from China, not that far away from Myanmar, where there's a great deal of Chinese interest. So, particularly important for us. Anyone would agree with that. And therefore, an Indian interest in the matter is very much there. And I'm not talking about the fact that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is now in India. She was here earlier also, if you recall, many, many years back when all of us were much younger. And India's entire involvement, in fact, I dare say, in the fact of the birth of Bangladesh. And so, therefore, the question of it not being of interest to us doesn't arise. This photograph says it all in that sense of the term. Thank you.
Yeah. Indeed, it does. This is, of course, the classic photograph from the 1971 war, the birthing of Bangladesh, when the Pakistani army signed that moment of surrender. Let me bring in Asif now. Asif, as a Bangladeshi, what are your expectations? What are your hopes? There are those, of course, who say that with the absence of one major political party, it isn't necessarily a representative election. But at the time of this recording, 50% of Bangladeshis have voted. That is a decent turnout by all measures for a country that's been racked by unrest and turmoil. As a young Bangladeshi, what are you hoping for after this election or from this election?
Okay, before I start giving my position, let me give a disclaimer. I will be talking as an academic, not with my national identity. So moving towards the Bangladesh case, yes, the election commissioner has said that in the last 7 hours of the voting, 48% turnout had happened, and that compared to the previous election, it's significantly high. I would not claim that this election is going to be non-controversial and it would be outrightly accepted without any criticism, but compared to 2014, 2018 and 2024 election, this election certainly has a higher segment of credibility in terms of participation, except Awami League, in terms of international observers and international journalists, and all of them have got a kind of free access to go across the country and also like report from the ground. However, the only question that would be considered in the future is the absence of Awami League, and that logic will haunt this election ultimately. But then what was the alternative right now? Frankly speaking, if we talk not in terms of theory, but if you talk in terms of the practice, like the practical ground, after 5th August, the state was almost at the verge of collapse. And it didn't happen because of the one day. It happened and all parties were responsible for it. And since then, the last 18 months, it was extremely challenging for Bangladesh. It faced economic challenge, it faced law and order challenge. There were like mob violences. And also there were expectations that the reforms would happen and a new country will be able to provide, for the people. Now, there was expectation on the one side and there were like failure on the other side. And in between, there were some geopolitical masters who worked in that space. And I would not exclude any of this country, including like America, India, China, Turkey as a new game player there. And one of the poorest one is Pakistan. So the point what I'm trying to make is that the situation is more complex that we can see in our open eyes. And in such situation, for the integrity of the state and for the stability of the state, the only acceptable way was to have a election and having a government who has electoral mandate, which we do not have. The last accepted election was 2008, when Hasina government was able to win over the election and form the government. And then since 2014, none of the elections are not out of questions. So that created a serious credibility threat across the political spectrum.
Is this election credible for you, given that one major party is not taking part? I hear you on the previous elections, but is this election credible for you?
I would say this election would be relatively credible with certain yes and buts.
Okay. Let's take this to Meenakshi, and then I'll come to General Dua. Meenakshi, Human Rights Watch has spent a long time documenting violations, civil liberties, whether under Hasina or more lately under Muhammad Yunus. When you hear Asif say that, look, there has been a question mark over several elections in the past, the fact is that there could be those questions brought to this election as well, despite the fact that I hear Asif, what was the option? Yunus was already being criticized for delaying the election. Many believe the election should have happened much earlier. Yet, when one major political party is simply not taking part in the election, as somebody who speaks for human rights, do you believe this election is representative?
Thanks so much, Barkha. The truth is, as Asif said earlier, the previous elections were also not participatory, and in fact were held in an environment of extreme fear and repression. To that end, this election was one where, from all accounts, there have been sporadic incidents of violence, but not incidents that can be causing great concern. And most importantly, an entire generation of young Bangladeshis who never had an opportunity to vote in an election in the proper manner where they could just walk in and there were polling agents and people were free to vote. They did not have that experience. This is the first time. Young Bangladeshis are telling me this, that this is the first time that they ever had that chance. To that extent, it's a good thing that this election has happened. Of course, there remains a concern about whether Bangladeshis really had the full choice that they should have had in terms of selecting leadership, since the Awami League was not present. But even so, I would agree with Asif that this is one where at least it has been participatory in a way where the previous three elections were not. I just wanted to go back to some of the things that you had said earlier in your opening statement, to flag that this failure of the Hasina government to hold these free elections was one of the reasons that young Bangladeshis have such distrust of India. As both Manjeev and Asif have said, there is a history of India's role in Bangladesh. And therefore, repeatedly, Bangladeshis would look to India to say, why is India not insisting that if India can have free and fair elections, why is it not insisting that Bangladesh should too? Why are they not insisting, telling Sheikh Hasina that she too should give Bangladeshis that opportunity? So part of the distrust amongst young Bangladeshis has come from there, and therefore we should perhaps keep that in mind going forward as we build relationships with the new government and press upon some of the things that we do hope the Indian government will press upon, which is the human rights protections, which have completely collapsed in Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina.
Okay, we have a statement from the MEA just in recent moments. We did receive an invitation to send observers to the Bangladesh elections, but we have not sent them. We'll play out the statement in a moment as soon as we have it up. The statement coming from the Foreign Ministry just moments ago. General Dua, let me bring you in. I hear what Meenakshi is saying, that, you know, maybe a generation of Bangladeshis turned towards Delhi. They felt let down by Delhi. Many Bangladeshis wonder why Hasina is still in India, and that's a decision India will have to take at some point, because of course everybody understands that Sheikh Hasina's life may not be safe if India were to even send her back to Bangladesh. But you know, it's always such a tough challenge to decide how much you should comment on another country's internal politics, whether then or now, whether then or now. But of course, we have taken a position, for example, today on minority rights, on the attacks on Hindus. The argument then being made is also speak on some of the other issues that matter to the people of Bangladesh. This is a minefield for us. There's no other word for it. How should we be navigating it?
Taking off from your last sentence, I think that's a very telling remark, Barkha. Uh, uh, it being a minefield for us, because you know, we are in a position of, pardon my colloquialism, is it damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Yeah.
You know, India, Bangladesh are not just two another neighbors. Like Ambassador Puri also brought out, we are intertwined in many ways. He counted different dimensions. Uh, we have cultural, historical, and population to population linkages. You brought out how our neighboring states can be affected. Two of them, Assam and West Bengal, are due for elections shortly. But coming to more into my realm, our
Yeah.
security dimension. You know, there are surprisingly, over the last 1.5 years of imbroglio that we've had with Bangladesh and the internal situation being there what it is, surprisingly, the army to army, military to military relations between India and Bangladesh have actually been very stable. And we have continued with our jointness, our joint exercises, our even our 500 million line of credit continues. So we have continued maintaining military to military relations because we have a lot of border issues where joint patrolling takes place, and there are certain other things that happen at tactical level. But the higher dimension, which you also alluded to, higher dimension of the security challenge is the fact that the China card, and now more increasingly the Pakistan card, with Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh gaining currency, whether it wins or not is remains to be seen. But gaining currency in Bangladesh, we see a very strong entrance, if I may use the word, of Pakistan through Bangladesh and influencing our border issues, influencing India-Bangladesh issues, especially with Field Marshal there, Field Marshal Munir, the Islamist forces there in Pakistan and Bangladesh aligning up. That's a security concern that we need to watch. So all in all, uh, I think we have to watch not only this particular election and its results with concern, we have to see how the developments take place after the elections, um, from our security ambit, because it is going to impact not only India, Bangladesh, it will also impact the regional geopolitics, as it were, as to how, which way
Yeah.
Bangladesh sits and turns.
I think that's a really important point. On a day when a UN report links the Jaish-e-Mohammed to the Red Fort blast, I should also say, and Asif, I want to bring this to you, that Sheikh Hasina's son, in an interview with us as well as to others, said that the one big change he believes is that groups like the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, groups that had been shut down by his mother, today have a freer space to operate. You heard what General Dua said, that there is an anxiety in India that the Jamaat doing well will have consequences not just for women and minorities within Bangladesh. We heard outrageous statements from the Jamaat-e-Islami on the participation of women, for example, in politics, but also from an Indian perspective, for it's seen as being very closely linked to Pakistan. I just want to ask you, are you concerned about sort of the mainstreaming of the Jamaat or a greater acceptability for it today? And what might that mean for Bangladesh?
Well, first of all, regarding what Mr. Joy said, I disagree with him. However, I want to add one point with him. It's not about Jaish-e-Mohammed. Bangladesh is facing more problem from Taliban and Hizb ut-Tahrir, another local outfit. And these two are extremely dangerous for our national security. Yes, they may have transnational network and transnational communications. And that might be linked with some of the Pakistan element or Afghan elements. But our terrorism problem is very much homegrown as well. This is something that we academics have been trying to discuss with the government for a longer time, that if you use always security frame and sensitize it, you don't solve the problem, you extend the problem. And that was the trap the Hasina government was fallen, that she sensitized the problem, and therefore the human rights violations started happening. So the question that it creates is that, look, Bangladesh has two Islamist problem. One Islamist, that is the far right Islamist problem. They're extreme. They do not believe in democracy. They do not, believe in negotiation. They want a kind of Taliban style state. That's it. And their way of achieving that state is the militant way. Now, these group, their number is relatively limited, but their power of inflicting violence is significantly high, and it has also increased over the time. So what happened during the Sheikh Hasina's period, there were some infrastructures which were created to deal with this militant element, and that infrastructure was created with the help of both America and the India. And initially these elements work very well. But after 2014, interestingly, the same element that was created to deal with this extremist element, this was moved forward to deal with the political opponent. And therefore, what you see that RAB was created to deal with the extremist militant, the same RAB is now going to a politician's home and picking up a politicians. And what it created is that over the time, people thought, oh my God, these people are not like dealing with the criminals that they're supposed to do, but they're dealing with the regular politicians. Now, Jamaat is belonging to that regular politician group. Why I'm saying it? Look, Jamaat, I cannot term it as a far-right extremist group, but it's a right-wing political party. In most of the Muslim countries, with the Muslim majority world, there is two forces. One is the far right one. They will use fatwa to stop you, and they will use those kind of religious rhetorics. But there is another group who relatively agrees with the democracy, comes up with their own Sharia standard, and wants to work within the modern state framework with the help of the US. Now, I would just like to add one point. See, let's not forget that this version of this modern Islamist politics is not getting the Western blessings. They are also getting Western blessings to some extent. And that is the end outcome of the war on terror. So the war on terror, what America was issued across the Muslim world, when they failed in it, so they thought that, okay, fine, let's go and do the political experiment there. But they are not understanding with that experiment, they are actually destroying our inner society's liberal fabrics. And that is more danger, I think.
I hear you. I think what you're saying is that you draw a distinction between a Taliban kind of militant orthodoxy and a religious social orthodoxy as propagated by the Jamaat, but still within the frameworks of a parliamentary democracy. Now, I want to, but from an Indian perspective, I should say that there are concerns, as General Dua just expressed, about the links between the Jamaat and Pakistan. You're not getting into that, fair enough. I want to just play out before I come to Ambassador Puri. The MEA statement, I was just sharing that the Foreign Ministry here has said that there was an invite to India to send observers, and India opted not to do so. Take a look.
Sorry, we did receive an invitation for sending observers. We have not sent our observers to Bangladesh to observe the elections. So.
Okay, I was hoping we would hear why or the thought behind it. Maybe it'll come later. The briefing is still ongoing. Ambassador, do you think there is a problem here? I mean, it's not an easy situation for India to handle. You have Hasina right here. So, it's a complicated question. And there are those who feel very strongly that she took refuge in India. India has to stand by its friends. Her life is not safe if she's sent back. And there are others who feel that this has now become a big obstacle between India and Bangladesh. And do you believe that we should have sent observers?
So, Barkha, first on former Prime Minister Hasina, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the question of our sort of, putting her out, that's out of the question. I want to take you back to the times when Khalida Zia and before that General Ershad, etc. For a long time, she was not there. And then, she went back and she did very well in the elections and so on. That's a different matter. This is a different matter, and we shouldn't conflate it with the simple matter of sending election observers. Why did we not? The only answer that I can think of, and I see logic for people, and this is not my decision, I may have taken a different one, that's a different matter, is that sending elections would have added to what the General Saab said, damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because let's say on the 50% or on any similar thing, what would the election observers have said? They would have agreed with whatever Meenakshi and our friend from Georgia State has said, that it was peaceful, this, that, and the other. This would have been blown up to add a sign of credibility. That then results in a number of other people saying, but what is credibility? So many people have opted not to cast their vote because they had no other option to do so. In fact, most reports are saying that the turnout in Dhaka was low because, let's say, those who had affinity towards the Awami League, what is their choice? They said, okay, we won't come and vote. That's the end of the matter. It's a way of looking at it. So in that sense, our election observers going was it had some merit, but not going, but by going also would have had a great deal of demerit. These are decisions that governments take. This, let me assure you on one thing: the government of India, knows, and they've dealt with difficult regimes and so on in different parts of our neighborhood. We have to deal with Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very large and important country in our neighborhood. We have not just civilizational ties, we have huge economic ties with them. And there is this entire business of the Chinese being close by, the question of our own neighboring states being there, the Pakistan hand, and as now lots of people say, the deep state and their ideas in the matter. Therefore, engagement with whichever government is certainly important. And I want to
And
be
yet
very
you say that Hasina must be continue to be given the safe
yeah, I
space.
mean, absolutely. The question, if from here, for some reason, she wants to move to the United Kingdom, whatever, I have no answers to that. That's a totally different matter itself. But, sending her back, oh no, not at all. That doesn't even show you good as a country which has given political refuge to people in the past. And I don't need to remind you of so many other examples, her own case also being a case in point. Not at all. We are a country which upholds these particular things, these values, and are quite apart from friendship. Our engagement with Bangladesh needs to be irrespective of this particular thing. It's all right. We have it. That's fine. And we will engage. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. For me, I hope the election results. And, whatever way the results go, obviously, we would all prefer that a mainstream political party, the BNP, because the Awami League is not there, that they win, they form the government, and that the Jamaat is kept out. Without going into that they are mainstream but fundamentalists, etc., without going into it, they tend to provide certain segues, which are certainly inimical as far as we are concerned. And so my simple thing would be, I certainly hope that all of this would allow a dialing down of the rhetoric which keeps getting directed towards India. India is a country, for whatever may be the various factors, etc., has an inbuilt interest in Bangladesh, and so does Bangladesh have with us. So a dialing down of that would result in many things happening. And once there's an elected government, believe me, no matter the rhetoric of the election, the government then has to take responsibility, and it comes forward. And most governments, what are we seeing from BNP leaders with whom we've had so many differences in the past, of saying, oh, we need to work with India. The world is pretty turbulent. And if you work with each other, you guarantee the one thing that matters to people in a developing country, which is a modicum of taking growth, development, tackling unemployment, etc. forward. People know that in Bangladesh.
So General Dua, let me get you to come in here. I think what Ambassador Puri is saying is, A, that Sheikh Hasina cannot be sent back. If she chooses to go to a third country, that's different, for as long as her life is believed to be in danger in her own country. B, the Jamaat, if it does well, would not be great news for Indian interests, something you've already flagged, irrespective of how Asif sees the difference between the Jamaat and groups like the Taliban. And C, I want you to come in on the Pakistan-China sort of dimension, because it's recorded in the parliamentary report that this is a matter of great concern. We've seen it more recently in cricket politics. We've seen Pakistan say we won't play India. This is in solidarity with Bangladesh. So you've seen this sort of renewal of equations between the militaries of Pakistan and Bangladesh, between the cricket bodies of the two countries, between maybe politicians. I don't know about people yet, but certainly all of these institutions.
Barkha, before 1971, we had to, I'm talking of the militarily, amongst other things, we had to contend with East Pakistan and West Pakistan. And so that was one thing that, in a strategic sense, we achieved among so many other things after 1971, that we eliminated the Eastern threat. That's what we felt. And for several years, it made a difference to us. Now, that time the China card was not so prevalent. But over the years, the China leverage or China angle through Bangladesh has increased, and we know there are different angles, different dimensions, and different milestones to it. But of late, the Pakistan card, I mean, that is Pakistan making an entry through Bangladesh, amongst other things, conjures up a vision of how it will be if both countries coordinate, especially if the fundamentalistic Islamic angle is played now as different terrorist organizations are, attacking India overtly and covertly from the western side. If we start having the same inroads, a lot of today's generation may not recall, but before Punjab problem, before Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir problem, we had a very violent Northeast. When I was a young officer, the kind of violence we've seen in Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, especially Nagaland, Mizoram, was was much more than we see in Jammu and Kashmir. So what I'm trying to get at, if those are the days that we've seen, and if that is the dimension we're looking at, we tend to start thinking that if we have that proxy war angle then again being played from this side as well. Now you see how much have we invested in Jammu and Kashmir in terms of our not only in terms of time and effort and the amount of forces that we have had to invest there. Similarly, if we start having these problems, so that itself is the biggest worry for our security establishment.
Yeah.
You mentioned cricket. I mean, we are seeing how Bangladesh and Pakistan are cozying up suddenly, if not suddenly, gradually, but more in the last after Sheikh Hasina's ouster. This has started happening more and more, and so this is the angle. And now with the China card looming much larger, we see China's card in Pakistan anyway. We know how the CPEC and so many other initiatives are going with Pakistan. We talk of a two front threat and a 2.5 front threat now, and the same thing starts happening over here. So then this feeling of surround sound is not something which is going to be very good for our country.
Absolutely.
And then that is something that we have to watch. Our security establishment has to start thinking of that. And as you know, today's world, there's no standalone security. Then it has to be all the dimensions come into play. It has to be diplomatic, security, economic, military. All the dimensions will have to be played together. So that's the larger construct that we have to be concerned about.
It is without doubt a consequential high stakes moment. Meenakshi, let me give you the closing comment. What do you think you would be most concerned with in the next few months or weeks to come, and what would you urge India to do in a way that our security and national interests are protected, but yet there is engagement, there has to be engagement, as Ambassador Puri says, while still giving Sheikh Hasina the safe harbor that she has sought?
Thanks, Barkha. In the decades that I worked with Manjeev, his voice echoes in my head because he keeps talking about how you cannot choose your neighbors. You have to deal with whichever entity is there. And we've discussed about Myanmar, we've talked about Nepal. And again, the whole talk about damned if you do or don't, the point is that India is the bigger country in the neighborhood. It is an extremely powerful country. It has a lot of influence and capacity to influence what happens. The reverse of that, of course, is that any political movement finds it easy, especially in the days of social media, to exaggerate and blame India for some of the flaws that they might want to cover up. That said, I think all countries do that. We also tend to do that in India itself. So I think that is a political narrative that we have to be careful about in the day of social media. We have to understand that this kind of disinformation and misinformation exists, and we have to counter it in the best way possible, both from India. I'm not even just only blaming Bangladeshis here. We know that the Awami League has been doing this, but we also should be recognized that many Indians should be very careful about what they believe when they see their social media. I would absolutely agree with Manjeev also on Sheikh Hasina. No court in India is going to allow her extradition. The conditions are just not safe. There is no court that is going to allow it. So I don't even know why that is even coming up, because it's not a political decision. As soon as something like this happens, someone, probably a human rights person like me, would go to court and ask the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would rule absolutely no, she's not safe. There is no way that any court would agree to her extradition, particularly on the basis of a trial where she didn't even have representation. So that question doesn't. But on the last thing that I want to leave on what India should consider, India has also fallen into the trap of rhetoric. This whole cricket thing, for instance, or not taking one player or something, which is what triggered all of this, is really concerning, because this what we've landed up with is forgetting the very existence of Bangladesh, which was that they chose their culture, their language over their faith. That is how they broke from Pakistan. And if we want to rely on that relationship, then we have to also create conditions where, as the bigger country, we are more generous. We can't keep carrying on and on about you're beating up Hindus, because then they will naturally come back and say, what are you doing to your Muslims? So we have to be, this has to be a much more mature relationship. I don't think Dr. Yunus had either the political heft or the skills to manage this relationship, and a lot of incorrect things were said or were allowed to be said by various groups. But lastly, the one key issue for India is irregular migration from Bangladesh. And any government that is concerned about that issue knows that unless there is stability, people will come. So India, if considering it's become such a political issue in both the Assam and the West Bengal elections, should recognize that people will keep coming because they don't feel safe. For earlier, we used to have BNP and Jamaat people that used to come across. Now we have droves and droves of Awami League people that are coming across. It's not just Sheikh Hasina that is in India. There are droves of Awami League people that are here, including the former Home Minister. So we have to, I think India needs to recognize that promoting human rights in the neighborhood is in its own interest. It is not to do with interfering. No one likes interference. No one likes criticism. But even in managing their own strategic interests, human rights is an entry point that would perhaps be helpful.
Ambassador, do you want to respond to that before we close? I can't hear Manjeev.
Yeah, Barkha, thank you. No, actually, very well said. I think everybody has made his points, that we have slight differences in perceptions from our colleague who's a Bangladeshi national, but speaking as an academic. These are understandable. We reflect an Indian perspective. But I so much agree with Meenakshi on this very important point. We need to also play our part, not just engagement, the foreign minister going there when Begum Khalida passed away, and all that is very important. Keeping up the military ties, extremely important. But, let's dial down the rhetoric a little bit. That's also very important, because what my friends who've been to Bangladesh of late, what they say is that, your dialing up the rhetoric here has resulted in the situation there at the level of the people being one which is problematic for Indians, which is just not an acceptable thing. Let's understand that. So my little thing is elections, very good. That they are not perfect elections, we all know it. That in the past they were not so very perfect, fine. This should have been better, because we should always be learning by it. Doesn't matter. Let the elections happen. Hopefully it will be a party in power which, whatever their own leanings, are wedded to democracy and democratic outcomes, and understands that in Bangladesh's interest are good relations with India, just as we also understand and must realize that in good relations with Bangladesh, we have something. We need to give something to them. This can't be exactly reciprocal. There has to be some degree of give and take and all of that. That's important. But Bangladesh is a critical country in our neighborhood with whom we must have good relations. There's a strategic imperative to all of this particular thing. And I have little doubt that, we will take the necessary steps as far as we are concerned. Hopefully, the side in Bangladesh which comes to power will also see that it is in its interest to do this and reciprocate accordingly. So let's wait a couple of days more, and once the results start coming out, one will see how this cookie is getting baked.
Okay, I think that is a fair note to end on. Just a reminder to everybody, 4,100 kilometers of a shared border with another country can simply not be ignored. So there is no way that you can look away from what happens in Bangladesh, and therefore India and Bangladesh are going to have to find a way to navigate their way out of this minefield, hopefully, leaving it there to Asif, General Dua, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, and to Meenakshi. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you, and see you very soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.